I felt it felt right when I said the words, I want to study to be a therapist. I feel that shift, when something happens inside you and there's no resistance of that now. And it taught me a lot of lessons. I needed a bit of courage to go through that place where nothing is certain. But it's been so freeing to let go of certainty. Really has changed my life. And I wouldn't have experienced you see them, and when you are able to convey to them that you understand their emotional sensation in that moment, it's so powerful. It's like
Welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Expedition, and today I'm talking to James Lyster. James, hello.
Good morning, Pavel.
Could you tell me more about the beginnings with you becoming a therapist? How did it all start?
Well, it's quite a long story. There's many twists and turns, but I suppose the beginning of my training really came about in 2017. And at the time we were relocating from the UK to Ireland. I really didn't know what I was going to be doing. I'd had a career which wasn't going to be available to me in Ireland. And my partner just asked me the best question ever to be asked, which is, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And the words that came out of my mouth were trained to be a therapist.
Wow.
Yeah, it'd been something that had been living in my mind probably for a very long time. But I always just felt maybe it wasn't for me, or I wasn't quite ready, or I didn't know I hadn't had enough life experience. But yeah, at that point in my life, everything just aligned and it was right.
At that time, probably you didn't have the course. It was all before. What did you think it was to be a therapist? What did you think it meant?
I now know very different.
Yeah.
But I had this idea that a therapist would listen to people's problems, but know what to say and what to do every single time. That there would be some kind of protocol to follow for every single presentation that you encounter, which I quickly learned is quite the opposite. And coming from a career and a life where protocol, rules, procedures were quite prominent and things that were to be followed, it was quite an adjustment to train to be a therapist in a place where nothing runs that way. And you have to run with where you're going. And that can be quite an uncomfortable experience at first. Yeah. So I was used to, if you do X and Y, you get this.
Yeah.
And psychotherapy isn't that at all. I've since learned.
So you kind of at some stage transitions from living or working by the protocols. This is A and B equals C, and then I'm becoming a therapist. I'm working in quite a different way.
Yeah,
must have been quite a journey.
It's been a journey, but it's been wonderful because in the training that we do, you uncover kind of a lot of unknown things about you, ways you behave or what you find comfort in that are really signs of things that have happened to you, and it doesn't have to be that way. So for me, discovering why I had been called to the careers that I'd done in the past, especially ones that are very disciplined and rules-based, I actually get a lot of comfort from rules. It quietens my anxiety to know exactly what's expected of me and what I need to do. But that was really a symptom of some of the things that I'd gone through. And in just the training alone really helped me to be okay with the unknown and be okay with not having a rule to follow. Yeah, so it's actually been very liberating to train as a psychotherapist. It's freed my life in many ways.
Yeah. And when you say that this was okay to live by different way, right? How did it start with the course? So you applied for a course, or you started with PSI?
PCI, yeah. So that I had to do a lot of research when I was still in the UK about what course I would do when we came back to Ireland, and there were certain factors I had to consider because we had a young son. So whatever training was offered, it had to be local to where we would be living. It had to be part-time. It had to fit in with my duties as a parent, because at that time I was the stay-at-home parent. So that needed to stay the same. So that did influence some of my choices, but the course that I chose happened to fit with all of the needs.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate in that way. Yeah.
So when you were coming from UK to Ireland, did you already know what course you picking and where you're going to live?
Yeah, I had applied for the course. I had done an online foundation certificate to qualify to do the course, which I did in the UK. I even flew over for the interview and nice. But it was all in place. It was all set to start in the September 2017. So in fact, it was good because it helped motivate us to get moving and to put down some roots here pretty quick. Yeah.
And you studied in Kilkenny?
In Kilkenny, yeah. So PCI have several sort of satellite centres around Ireland. They have their main course up in Dublin, but the Kilkenny course is the same syllabus. It's just run from a bit more local, a bit more convenient for me, yeah.
Would you remember your first day in the course?
Wow, yeah. That's that feels like a long time ago, but it really isn't that long ago.
Not much, yeah.
Yes, I do. I felt very excited. Yeah, I felt quite apprehensive because I didn't really know, or couldn't really gauge how academic it would be. It'd been a long time since I'd done any serious studying. So really my concerns lay around the academic side. Would I be able to write assignments? I hadn't done that for a very long time. And in fact, that's not really my comfort zone. So those were my kind of concerns, and it didn't really worry about the sort of people I'd meet. But again, it's not like any other university course, I don't think. It's very much about being present and about developing the skill of opening up and also receiving everybody else in a way. Yeah, it's odd that your learning and development really does rely so much on the people around you, which it might not in other courses. In other courses, you might learn from your lecturer and do research and your assignments, but it doesn't. Your grades won't necessarily rely on the people around you, where it does in psychotherapy. But I was very fortunate. Our group became very close, very supportive. And I hear that that's not always the case for some people, but it really was for me.
Would you remember anything that kind of really sparked your interest in the first year, any subject or a teacher?
Oh yeah, we had many inspirational teachers. Yes. What sparked my interest a lot? Well, I mean, we started at the very beginning. I suppose we started with Carl Rogers.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful place to start any counselling training, because just reading Carl Rogers is like having a hug. It's like being heard and seen. And I suppose I hadn't really experienced that before. And the notion that you don't really have to do anything to make a difference. There's no technique. It's more about the attributes that you can provide to people to help them make their own changes. And that was, that really surprised me and inspired me.
Anything else, maybe kind of exercise or anything else sticking out?
Oh yeah, one of my favorite exercises, and I do use this with clients, but I'll talk about that later, is the story of your name.
Oh, tell more.
Okay, so they did this exercise where they asked you to write the story of your name, and what they mean is what you understand about it, what you understand about how you came to be given that name. And it opened quite a lot for me, because I suppose your name is the very first gift you receive when you're born, and it stays with you for life. And although it belongs to you, it's used by other people more than it is by yourself. Wow. And so learning about why my parents called me James, why that was the name chosen for me, what their meanings or what they viewed that name to mean. It's quite powerful, because you would start to realize that that's the very first part of your identity that's kind of given to you. And we collect identity and we develop it. But there's maybe some expectations that come with your name. Like if it's a generational name, perhaps you have an expectation to live up to the person who had that name before.
The grandfather, the grand-grandfather.
That's right. And perhaps if your parents have chosen that name to name you after a person that they were close to, perhaps they project some expectations onto you that you need to live up to. So it's interesting. I'm the 7th James William Lyster to be born in my family. It was my dad's brother's name and his grandfather's name, and it's quite a traditional family name on my dad's side. So of course, and the extra kind of interesting bit about my name James is I really didn't know my name was James until I was about 5.
No way.
No, because everyone called me Jamie.
Okay.
So growing up, before I went to school, I knew myself as Jamie, and that's what everyone called me. Or sometimes my dad would call me Jim, and I never questioned that. And on my first day at school, the teacher was calling out names and saying James over and over again, and I was just sitting there looking around, and she said...
So it wasn't your name at that time?
Well, no, and she said to me, I think that's you. And I said, no, my name's Jamie. I was very sure about that.
Yeah.
And I had this, I suppose, my first existential crisis at 5 years old, going home with this confusion about who I was. Oh. And Mum asked me how was school, and I said I was horrible, didn't like it. What was wrong? The teacher says my name is James and my name's Jamie. And she went, well, your name is really James. Yes. So... But that's actually been a useful thing. I've kind of carried that duality through my life. Mm-hmm. James has always been my professional name. Okay. And Jamie is the name that my friends and family might call me. Mm-hmm. And in the sense that sometimes I think many of us have this when we feel like we're two different people, depending on where we are, or even more people. But yeah, so... and then, of course, it turns out on my mum's family... Nobody's really called by their actual name either. I've got an uncle who's known as one thing, but actually is legally another name. Even my mother herself, her legal name, I only found out a few years ago. We all call her Marie, but her actual name is Ellen Mary.
Why?
And I've never heard that. And, even my sister, I have a sister, Louise, but her name is Marie Louise. Wow. So... Everywhere I look in our family, we have these names that we're known by, but then out in the bigger world is our actual name. Have I spoken enough about names?
No. I want to just touch base on this one. So speaking of your family, right? Because I originally thought you are from UK. Mm-hmm. So what do you want to say more about your origins?
Well, my family, my dad is from Westmeath and my mum is from Wexford. And like many, they... emigrated for a more opportunity to the UK, and that's where me and my sisters were raised. But we were raised very much in an Irish community. So my parents were, where we lived, there were a lot of Irish people in the same situation, and grew up very much in a bit of a dual culture, very much being brought up British and going to British schools, but going to a Catholic school in Britain where most of the children there had Irish lineage, or they were the same as me. They had Irish parents, so we would celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and there'll be the Irish festival every year. And
the food, I guess, would be mainly Irish.
Grew up with, that's what Mum cooked at home, what she knew, but at the same time, foods that probably weren't available in Ireland in the 80s as much or as popular. So growing up, I really love Indian food, which even now today in Ireland is hard to come by, or come by good standard. But in England, that's a very British thing, liking Indian food.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. But very much culturally being part of two different cultures is interesting, I think. Although I wouldn't know what it's like to be part of just one, so it's all what I know.
Yeah, because you are you. That's all you know.
All I can know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So then, kind of in 2017, you thinking about coming back to Ireland.
Yeah.
What was it like?
Well, so my parents had moved back to Ireland when I was 18, and they very much wanted me to go with them. But at that time in my life, and when I looked at moving back to Ireland, that would be about 1998. My life was just sort of opening up in Britain, and I didn't see that there would be much for me. Now, that's probably not true, but that's how I felt. So I don't And now I look back, I think it's actually quite courageous for me to stay in a country so young. But I suppose that's when we're young, we have very little fear about things. Well, I didn't. I don't know if I do the same now, although I have just moved to another country again later on in life. But yeah, I very much stayed in the UK. They had moved back. Very happy with my life, but life had developed and moved. So at this point, I'd just become a parent with my partner. We'd adopted a boy, and he was 2 years old. There were things happening in the UK that didn't align with my values. The UK was leaving the European Union, and I didn't agree with that. And we just looked at our lives and realised where we had been is not where we were anymore. So what we wanted to do is figure out what we want. How do we want to raise our son? What opportunities did we want to pursue that weren't really available to us in the UK anymore? And that's why we decided we would come back. There's other kind of little things. I'd had a bit of a health issue, which is all fine now, but that brought me face to face with the importance of life and doing what you want to do, and rather than what you feel you should. So yeah, we made this decision. Let's come back to Ireland. My partner's from Ireland, and we wanted to be more connected to family. Although I have two sisters still in the UK, and I'm very close to them. My partner's, all his family were pretty much here, and it felt important to be raising our son with his cousins and uncles and aunts.
So then when you started the course, was somebody else also mistaking you, as I did now, for a British citizen?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time.
I can't escape that. It's the way I talk. And
the story is quite interesting. The story kind of, with that accent, but with the heritage and everything.
Yeah.
With all the family around. Like, how are you kind of finding it kind of when somebody is probably, maybe often, maybe even clients mistaking you for...
Depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Actually, it does bother me sometimes. I suppose it's because it's totally me. I don't know what's happening in other people. It's something that I experience is if people perceive me as British, then they're going to have certain assumptions about me that I won't necessarily align with. And that's okay sometimes, and sometimes it bothers me. Like with clients, it's fine if they think I'm British. I don't particularly mind. In fact, it's kind of an asset because I do become a person where they feel safe that I'm not connected to people that they will know, or they don't have that kind of worry in their mind.
I can relate to that because people would tell me that they would pick me because they can't even pronounce my last surname. They're like, nobody of my friends or family knows you. I'm sure they don't. So I'll just go with you. Yeah.
And I'm not particularly connected to the community anyways, because I only moved here back in 2017. So it's true as well, but it does seem to reassure clients who might be a bit wary of people knowing that they're in psychotherapy, and that can help. And also, I suppose, but it kind of disarms people when I do have cultural understanding that they wouldn't expect a British person to have. That could be quite interesting. But also, it's very caring in the psychotherapy room that people don't have to explain certain cultural traditions or things that happen. And it's not to say that any other therapists of any nationality can't know those things, and you would learn them. That can be useful. But also it's about belonging. So outside of the therapy room, I suppose it does bother me when I meet people, and this happens to be quite a lot then. I hear on holiday, and it does hurt a bit because...
What do you hear them say? Or is it the look? Is it the way? What is it?
What I hear them say is they're assuming that I don't belong here. That's not what they're saying.
Yeah.
But that's how it feels. When I hear people say, oh, you're having a nice trip, are you just visiting people, or you're on holiday? It makes me feel, oh, you don't belong. Yeah. So I have to obviously do that little bit of internal work in that moment because that's just my own belief.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do belong.
And they wouldn't say the same thing to your partner because...
No.
His accent is just
absolutely
Irish, so
no denying his accent. Yeah. So, yeah. But that's what I hear sometimes. That's the internal piece I'm still working on, I suppose, is you don't belong. When people, I suppose that's why I'm quite forthcoming with explaining how I'm here and why I speak the way I do, because I want to belong.
Did you find a similar kind of journey with the course, that maybe at the beginning you didn't feel like you belong, and maybe there was some explaining to do? I'm not saying that you had to. And did you belong at the end? Did you? How did you fit in?
I felt belonging pretty much by the end of the first day, which is
that's cool.
Incredible.
That's cool. It took me a while.
Yeah, I felt belonging. I was nominated as the student representative, a role I didn't want.
On the first day?
Yeah.
That's nice.
And they weren't nominating it based on any knowledge or belief about me. It was just like, we were told we had to choose someone amongst ourselves. Nobody was really volunteering. But then someone said, well, what about you, James? Why don't you do it? I was like, well, okay, I'll do it. Yeah, this kind of...
Did that help with that belonging part? What was it like, kind of?
It did, because pretty soon I was the go-between between the class and the college.
Yeah.
And it connected me with all of the students in my cohort in quite a particular way, administratively, but also people were coming to me with their issues, looking to me to help solve them. And that gave that kind of purpose, really small kind of purpose, but a role, having that role kind of put upon you on the first day did really help cement me as belonging, for sure. And I did feel respect from my classmates and appreciation from them as well for helping with that.
So what I'm kind of almost hearing is literally from the first day, probably 3 or 4 years before you finish the course, people were coming to you, this is my issue, just please listen to me and help me with this.
Yes.
Which is very much what we do in some way.
Yeah, and although I was shying, I didn't want to do the role, that kind of people seeing me as that has been something that's happened since I can remember. People would come to me with their issues or wanting support or have me to advocate for them. And it's actually something that I can do very well. It's kind of like I suppose it's a natural kind of skill I have. I enjoy being useful and needed, as most people do. But yeah, it wouldn't be unusual. I'd be the sort of person who would sit at a bus stop and a stranger would come up and tell me stuff or ask for help. That would be quite typical of my life.
So maybe that kind of help you identify what you actually want when your partner asked you, James, what do you actually want to do? Maybe that was all along there. Maybe just putting into words.
Yes, yeah.
And facing what you're saying, facing my own decision, my own kind of intention.
It's odd. It's so rare that we're actually asked that question. What do you want? I think we ask it of ourselves, and then we filter through in our minds what we should do or what people would be happy with.
Yeah.
But I was so grateful to my partner asking me that question that day, and me feeling I had the permission to express truly what I wanted. I think, it was quite a bold... The whole move, the whole change of career was a very bold thing, but we had just done several bold things in a row. It was like a momentum. Yeah. And of course, there's lots of unknowns, which would be my kind of kryptonite back then. I wouldn't like that. But yeah, it felt right. When I said the words, I want to study to be a therapist, I feel that shift, when something happens inside you and there's no resistance to that. I think, that was the very beginning of me really learning about my own awareness and how to work and how to live life in alignment with yourself.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And on that learning, would you remember any kind of further learning steps or stepping stones in the course? Like, kind of especially because you start things saying, at the beginning that you went from quite a structured employment into therapy. So I imagine in those 4 years, there must be maybe some restructuralizing done.
Absolutely.
In your part.
Well, on the one hand, right, the course has a structure. It has rules. It has learning outcomes. All of those things gave me my solid base. Yeah. So in terms of, I could structure my study time and my reading, and I could feel reassurance. So I'm reassured when I feel like I'm doing the right things. But then when it comes to kind of the personal development side of the course, that's something that can't be structured beyond the kind of requirement to do so many hours of personal therapy. Within that structure, how you do that is down to you. And yeah, that was and continues to be kind of an area where I'm challenged. Yeah, especially when it comes to myself, because many people who haven't kind of gone through this kind of personal development or even personal therapy, we don't tend to question ourselves too much, I think. We just go about our lives and
we stay in the lane sometimes.
Yeah.
Because things are unchallenged.
That's right.
They're not moving.
That's absolutely right. It's kind of, and I do kind of experience this with my client work as well, but on a personal level, it's like when you start to look beneath the hood of yourself and really look, it's like a blessing and a curse, because you finally come up against the things that have kept you limited or in the same lane, and you have the chance to be liberated in many different ways. The curse is, once you know these things about yourself, you can't unknow them.
Yeah.
And you have a responsibility now. Or when you start to see behaviors in others and realize what that's really about, it creates a bit of a burden for you to continue doing the work. So many people, you can notice them walking around their lives with a kind of ignorance about themselves, which is actually quite nice for them in ways, because they don't have to sit there in existential terror and really figure out the meaning of life too much. And they're limited in ways that they don't really know. They're not aware of it. They're not aware of their limitations, or the patterns of behavior that is keeping them stuck. Yeah. And there's nice things about that, and there's not so nice things. And it's the same with personal development. There's lovely things to know about yourself, and when you confront the aspects of you that you shy away from or you try and hide, and when you finally integrate them, that's wonderful. But you have to take care of them now. Yeah.
Did you guys have to kind of have personal therapy from the first year? Or what was it like during the course?
Yeah, we had to have a certain amount of hours done before we were due to start clinical placement. I think we had to have a minimum of 25 hours done before we could start seeing our own clients. So they encouraged you to do it from day one. Yeah. But it was up to you. But you really had to have it mostly done by year 3.
Okay.
And I did my personal therapy in kind of 3 different phases. So I did like my first 20 hours with one particular therapist who was really lovely, got on really well with her. But I couldn't foresee myself doing another kind of 30 hours with her. I felt I needed someone who would kind of challenge me a bit more, or I don't know. Just, I felt like I'd gone as far as I could go with her.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that was kind of wrong, because I didn't know back then. I was like, a lot of my classmates were with the same therapist, and we'd talk about our experiences quite openly. And some people, I remember thinking, I don't think I'm allowed to.
Okay.
Again, this thing about rules, I need to know what I can and can't do. And so I spoke to my lecturer at the time. My lecturer said, of course you can change therapist. Yeah. It's your money. It's your development.
It's your choice.
Yeah. And he said something which actually sticks with me today is, your therapist is your employee.
Okay.
And I use that a lot in therapy. Like, I first of all, I remind myself I'm this person's employee, which helps me sometimes. And I remind them, I work for you. And that's really empowering sometimes. People, it can help, maybe we'll talk about that a bit further later, but reminding people of the power they have, which he did. He reminded me of the power I had to choose. So I changed to a different therapist, and had an experience with the next one. It wasn't quite right for me. Nothing wrong with him. It wasn't the right one. And I called that pretty quickly. Yeah. So, and then I found the last one that I did my quite a big piece of work with, and he was really wonderful. And I owe a lot to him. I was really grateful for the space he provided and the challenge he gave me.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So it's having those experiences with those different therapists actually, I think, was useful. And that each of them had wonderful qualities that I learned from and took with me. But I am still me. I'm not trying to emulate anyone. And it took me a while to realise that the value I have is no one else can do therapy the way I do.
Yeah.
There's only one of me.
Yeah.
And I won't be right for everybody. That's okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And the same. I think most therapists would kind of hopefully hold that belief as well.
Yeah. But I suppose I didn't at the beginning of my course. I suppose I had quite a lot of pressure on myself as well. Like, I'm taking time out of earning money, I suppose, and that puts a burden on the family. I had the support of my partner, but there's a bit of an expectation that, I'll qualify in this and it will be worthwhile. So I had that playing on in my mind too. And I suppose I was thinking, how will I make this a job or a career? Like, will it be worth it? So part of the temptation would be to look for the formula that works, Okay, this is how much you have to charge, or
But now today, you being there, do you think there is a formula?
No, not at all. No, there is obviously there's principles and foundations, but within that, I think it's actually a lot bigger and wider world than. I think any therapist who sits down and believes that there's only one way to tackle an issue is a therapist I would be wary of, and I don't ever hear that really. Yeah. Very rarely. I think I've heard it once or twice, where people were quite attached to a particular model or mode,
and they would swear by it, and this is the only way how you,
and I don't know. Maybe that works for them. Yeah, but it wouldn't work for me. But I had to really. My personal part was abandoning that part of me that, not abandoning, but reassuring that part of me that wants a technique, that wants a formula to give to someone.
To hold on to something that is maybe more solid than me in a second or third year in college, hoping that one day I'm going to have a, the really good job that actually pays the bills.
Yeah, that too.
To avoid the anxiety maybe.
Absolutely. And I'm on the other side of that now, and it taught me a lot of lessons. I needed a bit of courage to go through that place where nothing is certain, but it's been so freeing to let go of certainty. Really has changed my life, and I wouldn't have experienced that, I don't think, if I hadn't gone through the course. That anxiety we might feel about not knowing. Which I encounter with many clients. I know that feeling really well. And I know what's on the other side of it. My job is to help support them, hold their hand, give them my shoulder to walk that walk if they want to as well. Like, they might not want to. And that's okay as well. But I had to really do a lot of internal work to let go of that pressure to know the right thing to do or the right thing to say. Yeah, it brings comfort, but actually that's not the answer.
I think similarly as you were speaking about your development during the course, where when I experienced similar stuff during the course, obviously people kind of shared, the classmates share where they are in their therapy journey, all in confidential way, obviously. My huge thing for me was realizing that somebody else is looking for different things in therapy, which was like, oh, different people need different things, and I only kind of saw my way for a moment that, you know, this is what I want to get from my therapy, and obviously that's what therapy is, right? You know, and then I was like, oh, somebody else has completely different expectations, needs in therapy, different journey, how they go through it, different way how they maybe articulate it more in words rather than feelings, or just sitting with feelings, really different ways. Then I was amazed how like wide that spectrum can be.
And did you find, Pavel, that, you know, when you listen to your peers talking about their therapeutic journeys, that you might compare and think, oh, I'm behind, or I need to be doing more of that? Did you ever feel that?
I didn't see it in a behind, because it was more like a spectrum, like a round stuff, and somebody is here, somebody's there, or maybe more like a 3D thing. You know, I definitely kind of felt like I need to work more because of me doing a course in second language.
Yeah, oh, that's true.
At the beginning, it was terrifying for me, being like, how will I write assignments? And the same teacher who's marking all the assignments will always know, okay, I can barely get through the sentence. What is he trying to say?
Wow.
And that was terrifying for me. But actually, after kind of I developed a relationship with my classmates, it actually disappeared, because some people, even though their first language is English, they have difficulty, really difficulty putting in a sentence together. Yeah. For lots of different reasons. Maybe they're on a neurodivergent spectrum, or maybe they just don't have they don't read books, they just have a hard time doing it. So it really liberated me in that way, how you felt liberated in your experience. Yes. So I was like, I don't need to be an English professor or you know, like, you know, I'm still working on it, obviously. But they really kind of helped me, being like, okay, I can just get through the assignment and just more focus on what's in it rather than how it's written. Yes. And similarly, kind of working with clients, I know sometimes I say stuff that just don't make sense, and they just tell me, and I just try it again, and it works. Yeah. So you had to learn to be okay with that. Yeah. Because I did. I think it was more about my own self-judgment on me, because nobody really approached me being like, listen, when you just speak about your English, it never ever happened to me. Not in the course, not in my other jobs. You know, it was just me holding it. Yeah. And holding myself accountable to standards I thought I need to reach. Yeah. That was your own limitation that you had in your mind. Yeah. But it helped you, having people around you, like looking at the people around you and realizing that that's something I don't need to be so concerned about. And it kind of, and I don't know, maybe it was that way how I was holding myself back before I kind of engaged more with the course. Maybe it was one of those first fears I had to get through to kind of properly fully engage with the whole material and with the whole therapy aspect. You know, and also, you know, I wasn't the only one who wasn't, you know, native English speaker, so that kind of helped a little bit as well. But I think by the third year, I might have been the only one. Okay. I can't remember now exactly, but I think kind of definitely finishing the fourth year I was the only one who was. But then it didn't matter for me. No. But it was in some way, it was funny, because I was like, wow, how come? I realized at some stage I was like, how come only I survived from those non-English speaking classmates? And that was interesting for me, and I kind of get myself a little bit of pat on my back. Like, fair play to me. Well, what was it about you that helped you survive? A lot of things. My therapy, for sure. And I also changed therapists. Because I wasn't. I actually for a long time didn't know I'm not happy with my first therapist, because I for a long time didn't know what a really engaged therapist is like. For a long time, I thought, you know, I'm paying this person, and I'm like, I'm struggling. I'm just not feeling it, and I just kind of again maybe pointed a finger at me, but then it became more obvious, like, this is not the right fit. I'm not saying the therapist is bad person or bad therapist, but at the end I was like, I need to change. This is especially as you kind of start doing more exercises in the course, and then you kind of read up on all the stuff where you see kind of Rogers, right? We were watching the YouTube clip with him as well. I think Rogers and Moria, what was her name?
Right.
Rogers, and he had a client who literally kind of had
Moira,
had it taped. And it was so interesting to see, and I'm like, I'm not feeling that with my therapist. You know, I think I need to change therapists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then kind of that helped a lot.
Yeah.
And once I kind of maybe got over the first year with the assignments,
Mm-hmm.
it was much more like being like, I can do assignments.
Yes.
Yeah, I can do this.
Who knew?
And nobody's calling me in their office and being like, I don't understand a word of what you're trying to say. It just, you know.
That's what you worried about the most.
True.
That you wouldn't be able to express what you wanted to say or wouldn't be understood.
Yeah.
And
so
you
it
were.
was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know that video you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember being amazed by the ease of which Carl Rogers seemed to navigate and engage with that woman.
It was like being a grandfather. It was like he being like an uncle or grandfather and being like, hey, just tell me how things are. And
that's right. And and you could see how effective the connection was in just a few minutes. Whereas in that series, there's Fritz Perls, the Gestalt.
And the third one as well.
And Fritz Perls was irritating me. He was very showboaty and being smart and clever. And I remember feeling really allergic to him. And,
it was almost like being arrogant.
Yes.
Even though Gestalt can be like that it's really kind of... But I just can't imagine 50 minutes of Gestalt therapy.
But I don't think
full-time.
Real Gestalt therapy is like that.
Okay.
I don't think that's the experience of people in it at all. I think he was showboating for this video.
For the taping.
Yeah, so he was being particularly picky. I think it's a lot more subtle and a lot more... I think it holds a bit better. I wouldn't be sure. It depends on the therapist, I suppose. But I did a bit of Gestalt learning in my further training to work with adolescents. So I read up on an approach by Brona Stars, who's an Irish psychotherapist who's worked with adolescents and has a master's program in it. Part of her approach is based in Gestalt principle. So that was interesting. And I had to reevaluate because I had created this kind of aversion to Gestaltism from that one video, 5-minute clip of someone back in the 1950s. I'd created a whole narrative in my head about what it was and what it... When I had to read it was quite challenging because I didn't want to let go of that view. But
I might still hold some of that still because I know like some of the techniques are maybe all right. I would use some of them, but I do kind of like maybe that wasn't for me. Yeah, but I could be wrong.
That's how I felt.
Yeah,
and it's not that I practice Gestalt therapy in any real sense, but I understand the principle of it, and sometimes it's useful when working with adolescents because it's all about understanding or getting into the field of a person's experiencing. And as an adolescent, they are taking part in many different fields of which they have very little autonomy. And that's quite interesting in adolescent work.
Can I ask you, so during the course, sharing stuff with your peers, one of the big things for me was really having access to materials that really kind of give you the sense of therapy, because that's like a private service. You know, most of the time one-on-one, you can also do obviously groups, but let's like the video we mentioned with Rogers, you know, that's kind of where I realized, that there is really a restricted kind of number of materials where you can literally see how somebody else is working. Because what our teachers always were saying to us, and I really get it now, is like, you're going to be really different therapists to your classmate. And that's okay. It doesn't mean different bad. It means different, just different. And as you said, you're also going to attract different clients. You know, what was it like kind of for you kind of really kind of having the stepping stones and being like, I'm developing myself. This is how I'm actually putting stuff together in my mind, how I'm going to be working when I finish.
Yeah, it took a while for me to kind of, again, abandon the idea of there's a prescribed way to be and there's a technique to follow. And that really did take a while. And I suppose that only really started happening when I started my clinical placement, which is kind of it's a very scary idea.
And it was third year, was it?
Yeah, third year. Yeah. So you're right. There's not really anywhere you can access something to view or understand how therapy works, because what is out there is either role played and that doesn't feel quite right, or it's in the media, or it's in a film. We've all seen those films where people are in therapy and their therapist says these wonderful, weird, insightful things, and it's just not how it is. And I had to let go of the need to emulate people or a technique. But third year, going to start my clinical placement very quickly taught me, or I very quickly realized I had to let go of the idea of who a therapist is and what they do and how they do it.
Can I ask you, where did you do your placement?
Yeah, in Living Life Counselling. They're based in Arklow and Bray actually, and they have another site in Arklow, and they're a low-cost counselling service. They're a charity, but I had done a few hours with a kind of family resource centre, but it wasn't really set up very well. Again, I didn't really know because I hadn't really done much there for a year. But I knew it just didn't feel quite right. And this centre, they were very well organised. They cared very much about their volunteer therapists, which from people in my course, I know that wasn't the case. I know a lot of them felt very exploited or put in situations they shouldn't have been put into ethically. And that's a lot to take on as a student counsellor.
Who doesn't know what actually, you just realizing what I'm supposed to do. Let me find out in a year or two, and then I'll let you know, because I just got the keys from the office. That's all I know, where the office is.
Absolutely. And I think some student counsellors could be very easily exploited or put in situations that they shouldn't be. But Living Life did they had a very good assessment process before they even put anyone before a student counsellor. They tried to grade the client presentations to what they believed you could handle, which was, they were very supportive. I can't say enough good things about them. I had such a great experience with them. They would give money to help you towards your insurance, because we can't be paid. Nice. So they would, every year you could claim €100 towards your insurance, which actually covered student insurance. They would give you vouchers as a Christmas gift, and they did free CPD trainings.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's always nice.
And they teach you a lot there. So very lovely place to do a placement. If anyone's looking or thinking about it, I'd recommend Living Life.
Do you remember your maybe first or second client? Kind of, what was it like? Kind of maybe for you, not really about the client, but like, what was it like for you? I just see your face changed for a moment when that memory came up. Like.
Wow, it was. I was very excited to do it. So I kind of went in with a bit of a cockiness, I suppose, or a bit of a, I've got this. And look, that's the way I would handle stuff. Is I'm a great believer in believing in yourself. Because I know that if I go into something feeling a bit iffy, then that's what my experience will be. So, no, I genuinely kind of like, no, I know this. I've trained. I've shown my skills in school and
in the fish bowls. That's what we call the fish bowls, when you pick a classmate or they pick you, and you just have to like a 10 minutes or 5 minutes, like, oh yeah, I'm feeling this. Let's see what you're going to do with that now.
And like my previous career, I never had the guarantee of knowing what was coming through the door or what I was going into. And we weren't trained to know everything. We were just trained to know that we could deal with anything. Like,
do you want to say more about the career? I
could talk about that a bit. So I always wanted to be in helping professions, and I thought about nursing for a while, and I just kind of fell into working for the police as a police constable. It was an opportunity came up.
And for somebody who doesn't know, like me, police constable.
So what does this mean? That's in the UK. When you join the police, you join as a constable or a police officer, but the rank is the lowest rank you are. But it's a uniformed position, and I didn't realise how competitive it was to get into. I kind of applied as a bit of a lark, I suppose. I wonder. And I got through, and they say, you know, out of 5,000 applicants, that 80 of you are being trained this year. Wow. And it's like, oh, right. So people really want to do this job.
Then it became different story, you know, different kind of like a meaning for you when you saw the numbers and the comparison of.
Yeah, I just thought it would be, I just thought, oh, this is a steady job. It's good enough money. There's a pension, nice uniform. I think I'll look handsome in that. Yeah, I was a bit naive. I was young.
How old were you?
I was 20. Yeah.
20? At police officer?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I know. Yeah. And that was, so, you know, I joined up, did my training, and pretty quick after the first 2 years, I applied to become a detective. I was really...
You applied? Mm-hmm. So you have to apply to...
Yeah, it's because a detective constable is the same rank as a constable. It's just a different type of working. Uh-huh. A police constable and, you know, or uniformed officer, I suppose you'd say, they're dealing mostly with responding to emergencies and stuff like that, whereas detectives are investigating serious crimes. They do that in a different way. It's very much about the skills that are needed are slightly different. Yeah, you need to be a problem solver and a logical thinker and, quite creative. It's quite a creative role. So, yeah, I mean, I joined the police not really understanding what a police officer does, truly. Yeah. But I learned what I loved about the police service is the rank and the structure and the rules. Oh, I felt so comfortable because when someone tells me what's expected, I can deliver that. Uh-huh. I can't deal with not knowing. Yeah, so I did really well in training school because I love following rules. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, they had like uniform standards. I knew the standards, so I always made sure I did it, and I never got tripped up. And I got noticed for things like that. Yeah, so I was noticed for my kind of ability to grasp legal principles, which that's all just rules and procedures as well. You know, that's something you do need if you're going to be a detective. Mm-hmm. And then once I trained and qualified as a detective, where I found my calling and where my skills really lay were interviewing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so...
It looks like you I have to say, it looks like you've been led to the therapy job.
Absolutely. If you believe in the universe putting things in your path or preparing you, this certainly was, because I really loved and was good at, I don't mind saying I was good at it, I know I was, interviewing. So that would be interviewing suspects of crimes and quite complicated crimes, and also interviewing victims. So people who had suffered horrendous things, really. That's where I felt really connected. So I had a mentor when I was learning interviewing skills, and he said so many police officers make the mistake of going into an interview like it's a war, like they have to get information out of someone. He said that's not the way to do it. He said you need to build rapport and connection. You need to build trust. If people are going to tell you anything, they need to know that you're willing to receive it, that you want to. And that was the very first lesson I ever learned about counselling, and it was in a completely different career. It was about making genuine connection with people.
It sounds like, Roger, it sounds like the video we were actually discussing a moment ago.
And I don't think that it was just that particular mentor, because I worked with other detectives in other areas or from other stations, and they would still go into interviews with this kind of aggressive, I believe you've done this thing, I'm going to get this confession out of you. And I wouldn't have had that approach, and it used to unsettle me to have that. But yeah, to sit down with someone who is accused and reminding yourself that that's just an accusation. It's not certain. It's not my job to judge this person or to decide anything. It's my job to invite them to share what information they want to, either to help clear their name or to avoid getting in trouble. So, you know, I was known as a good interviewer. And then with the victim side, so that really came forward when I went to work for child protection.
Okay.
So I would do a lot of interviews with children from as young as 3. Yeah, trying to interview them. Again, it's about trust, connection, non-judgment.
Must be quite a different game to then interview children.
Yes, no, it is. Because
the language, the words, I guess, I don't know, you tell me.
Language, word, and their experience. So they've been shaped by, you're not interviewing children just for a laugh. If you're interviewing children, something bad has really happened to them. Yeah. So they would be sensitive to the way you are, very much. I mean, I wouldn't have fully understood this at the time. It was more of an instinct thing. But children that have been through trauma will adapt and they will create defense mechanisms, and there'll be certain things that will trigger them. Yeah. Even being nice to a child could be triggering if they've been groomed in a certain way. Yeah. So I always was very interested in the way you had to adapt and manage a conversation. And therapy is not quite the same, but there's elements of it for sure. If there's a way that you're speaking to a client that appears to be bringing about something defensive or perhaps anxious, you have to spot that and attend to it. And not be incongruent, not be something you're not, but be switched on to it. And I really...
Being attuned. I'm hearing you, not saying the word, but I'm hearing the attachment part, being attuned, the caregiver.
And that was a skill that I really started developing in the police. And it's the part of the job that I enjoyed the most was the connection with people, be it suspect or victim. I didn't mind. I just loved having those conversations and building rapport and feeling like we've achieved what we needed to. The sad part of it was, especially with the victim interviews, is the boundaries of that are all about gathering evidence and maintaining evidence. So not being able to show empathy in quite the same way you can as a counsellor.
And you have a goal, you have almost like a goal, like I need to get evidence and I only have an hour or 2 or whatever it is.
I need to get the evidence and I need to not contaminate it, which is kind of a weird concept. But if you're interviewing a child and your questions are leading, what comes out of their mouth can't be used. You've put the words there. And it's really tricky. It's hard. It's exhausting. But it's very worthwhile when you feel you did it good. And this is where there was a bit of a difficulty for me, was because my role is to gather the evidence. My role wasn't to tend to help in that way. Right. They might not realize it, but I am helping, because I'm helping to secure hopefully a conviction and justice for this young person and protection. But in the moment, it might feel a bit cold that I'm not showing empathy to the terrible thing they've told me. It doesn't mean I didn't feel it, absolutely. But it was that was the frustrating part. When you wanted to reassure a vulnerable person, because it wasn't just children, it would be adults as well. When you wanted to reassure a vulnerable person and not being able to because of the boundaries of that room. The boundaries are facts over feelings. Yeah, pretty much.
So you having that really honed skill for several years, and then you fast forward and having your first few clients, was there kind of any old habits trying to creep in?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you find yourself like, oh no, I don't have the hoodies hat anymore, I need to put this one down and get the therapist hat on?
Yeah, constant. I still had to do that to a smaller degree then, but my first in my clinical placement, people coming in and forgetting I could respond empathetically. That sounds really...
So not holding yourself anymore.
Yeah. That seems like such a simple thing. But reminding myself, I can acknowledge that feeling. It's not going to damage any evidence. I'm not collecting evidence. Yeah, and that took a bit of getting used to. It wasn't too bad. But still sometimes like my curiosity about something can step forward. And I may find myself asking questions and thinking, why am I asking that question? Yeah, that's to satisfy something in me. And so your internal supervisor's working pretty hard sometimes, especially when it just feels familiar to that kind of a situation you might have been in when I was a police officer. So, but yeah, no, it was an interesting thing. But then once the feeling of being able to connect and to let someone feel validated, like when they hear back that you see them and when you are able to convey to them that you understand their emotional sensation in that moment, is so powerful. It's like it's a feeling I can't describe. It's both selfish and giving as well, because I get something out of that. And I have to remind myself that it could be quite easy for me to be searching for that hit of emotional satisfaction at the cost of the therapy. And most therapists will understand what I mean by that, I suppose. But yeah, it was very... Yeah, I suppose I wasn't... So going back to the very beginning of that is going into the first session, I wasn't scared or worried. I had this kind of cockiness, but it was an experience that I wasn't expecting. It was... I felt confused, felt lost quite a bit. Felt helpless for the first time in a while. Helpless. That's a big one. That's a big one. Yeah. Because in the police, the job is to problem solve. Yeah. To not feel helpless. What good is a police officer who's helpless? If someone turns to you and said, this is what's happening to me, you step in and you take care of it. Yeah. And here, it's the opposite. And that was a weird feeling. That took a bit of time to get used to. So I don't like feeling helpless or useless. I like to feel useful. Yeah. And at the beginning of my therapy training, I felt useless quite a lot. But it's all a perception. It's not true. And that's what I had to learn. Yeah. I've learned it now. But there's still the odd time where that familiar sensation of, I'm not as effective or useful as I want to be. Yeah, that can stir. And you have to be really self-aware and in tune with yourself to know that. And it's not a problem that it happens either. Like, I used to get quite down on myself in supervision. I would be quite critical of myself. I can't believe I felt that. And my supervisor was wonderful in saying, are you not a robot? Yeah. Nobody wants a robot counsellor. But as you said, it was your feeling, and maybe quite possibly, your clients wouldn't share the helplessness with you. They would I'm fine. You're doing a good thing. Absolutely. You're feeling helpless, but I'm getting my stuff. It's how I used to measure usefulness. I had to relearn that. I had to let go. So much unlearning you have to do in this training. Unlearning things about the world or yourself. Yeah. I think it's such an interesting position being in a third and fourth year when we kind of start working with clients, and because you kind of always, at least for most of us, right, we would have a space to bring it back to group supervision in college or your own supervisor, and then you have your own therapist. So the kind of support system seems to be most of the time in place to be really, really helping you along the journey. Yeah. Was it the same thing for you, the experience you had? Yeah, but I had to get over myself again in another way, which is my resistance to being supported and asking for help. That's interesting. Yeah. That's something I never really had trouble with, asking for help. I still have this tendency, but I need to be independent, sufficient, invincible almost. So it took a while in the group work for me to actually connect in a way that was vulnerable. Yeah, that took time. But that is a common thing that happens with trainees. Yeah. Because most of the time, like in life, we are on our own, and you have to make your decisions, go to work, get up in the morning. You're not asking anybody to
wake you up because you're adult.
Yeah.
You playing the adult role, right? So I think that's quite a maybe common experience people might have.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would see that trait perhaps in people, because it is a limiting trait to deny yourself support and help and vulnerability. That's really harmful. It can be, because it robs you of genuine connection with people. I remember sitting around and people are sharing stuff, and people were sharing quite serious, tragic things that had occurred to them, and me feeling like, oh, I don't really have anything on a par with that. And then kind of one of the facilitators did chime in and said, it doesn't have to be the Trauma Olympics in here.
Trauma Olympics, that's
you don't. Your trauma doesn't have to be this. It could be you lost a button. It doesn't matter. It's what what feeling you want to share, what comes up. That was really permissive for me. And of course, I did have some trauma from my career that I felt I couldn't share. I felt I couldn't burden people with, because I knew how horrible it had been for me. And this is another thing I had to learn about, and clients do this, and I see it now. It's when they're taking care of their therapist. When there's things they won't say because they don't want to burden. Even though they're paying for that space. It took me a long time to get to it in my personal therapy. I couldn't unload it. I felt so guilty. When I thought about it, I was like, right, okay, I really have to address this thing. I really need to speak about this experience I had. And I can't do that to my therapist. He's so lovely. I can't have him going to sleep with that image in his head. And what I couldn't appreciate was that image won't be in his head, not the one I have. He might construct his own image, but it will never be what I saw or what I experienced. And it took me a while to do that. And I remember in the session after we talked around it so much for preparing, made it into such a big deal when it really wasn't.
It was for you at some
It
stage.
was, but yeah, no, that's right. See, here I am minimizing myself, but yeah, it was a big thing. We did all this prep, and I got through it so quickly.
You wanted to just get it out, and that's it.
And then I spent most of the rest of the session feeling utter guilt. It was so horrible. I felt ashamed that I burdened this person. I still felt that way.
This poor person, with a trained psychotherapist, to deal with this.
But something remarkable happened, and this is why I learned the power of not having to do anything much at all. Just that person really hitting the nail on the head with how I felt. Just saying it back to me. Wow, that you just described this, and you said you felt that, and now you're sitting here feeling utterly terrible that you've shared that. And
so you got the empathy for not for the whole thing, the memory. For experiencing the whole thing that stayed with you as the aftershock of the whole event. But
that's when I realised the trauma wasn't the experience at all. The trauma is what I had done with it. The
story you made from that trauma, the story that stayed with you. And then you were probably holding on to for a couple of years.
Quite a lot. It actually was. It was a trauma that really impacted my life in ways I didn't understand. It could have derailed a lot of things because it impacted my behaviours and my decisions. It could have, and it did impact on my relationship at some points. Because my need to stand alone as well and not ask for help, but needing help made me isolate myself a bit from my partner, and the connection was lost. And then I ended up leaving the police quite suddenly. Very knee-jerk decision was made. And it was connected to this trauma. It's just this job that I worked on. Wasn't something that happened to me in the sense that like I wasn't attacked, or it was something I investigated that was just so horrific. And so I left the police and I joined an airline to work as cabin crew. And craving no responsibility and craving escape. That's what that was, but I didn't realise that at the time, and I only learned that through my therapy. But because I felt so useless, and my need to be so strong, I couldn't stand to be at home. I had to fly away.
I'm just literally having the picture of the stress response, fight, flight, freeze, and it looks like you literally went into the flight.
Literally
with the
flight
cabin
mode.
crew.
Yeah.
I'm going to fly off from this. That's causing me all those emotions and turmoil, and it's going over the boundary of my workplace. It's going into my own personal life. Yeah.
And I didn't understand that at the time. Well, I knew something was up, but there's kind of a bit of I don't know if it's still the same, but there was a bit of a culture in the police about being okay with stuff.
Being a tough man and getting on.
Yeah.
Just getting on with it. With stuff.
People would say, I'm always here if you want to talk, but it didn't feel genuine. You didn't feel that you could say things and not be judged. And there's a need in the police to feel 100% confidence in your colleagues, because they can literally save your life. Yeah. If you don't trust the people you're working with, that they can do the job, how are you going to be able to go and do that arrest warrant? Or if you would feel unsafe. Yeah. So to say I'm vulnerable here, I'm upset,
I need help.
I need
professional help, not just somebody saying, just talk to me when you can. Yeah,
that's a hard thing to do, because you're potentially opening yourself up to, right, well, my colleagues may not feel they can trust me, that I'm up to the job, that I can do what I would need to do in an emergency. There's a lot of that kind of going on. But it's not because the police aren't caring, that they would have counselling in place. They had 3 full-time counsellors in the force. They would do debriefing, but people wouldn't participate in it for the fear. Like, they would, but not in a real way.
So they would be physically present, but maybe not emotionally present.
Or they'd say I'm okay when I'm not. Well, I did. And I know colleagues did. I'd lost quite a few colleagues to suicide. In the police, men. So I suppose that's why I have a passion for working with men in general. Like, I work with everybody, but I do really like to work with men, because I think they can be quite, by and large, forgotten in terms of mental well-being. And it's hard for them it was hard for me. So I want to be there for them.
And from my experience, and I want to check with you if you have some experience, men actually prefer working with other men.
Yes.
That's what I'm finding.
I've noticed
and
that.
I was amazed by that when I finished. Right. When I finished, because I finished working my placement in Dublin, where I would get like a wide variety of clients. And ever since I moved to Waterford, it's mainly men. I'm like, what's going on? And my supervisor, who's also a male, was like, that's what you're going to get. Guys want to talk to other guys.
They do. It's really important.
Yeah. I think it's because maybe also because there is not that many of us in therapy. It's I don't know the percentage, but like it's definitely
not as many as there are more women.
We are a minority in a way, and I think it's good to kind of have that space for men and offer the service, because in some way I can imagine how it can really, really help having a guy therapist who understands you on some level. Obviously not on all the levels, because we're all different, but having the support there.
I think it's really important that there are male therapists for male clients, because men need another man to validate it. I know it seems it shouldn't matter, but it does.
I think kind of the first obstacle is to engage with therapy, and I think it's much more easier for men to engage, especially for the first time, right, with another male therapist.
And it's quite interesting to see how surprised they are at how deep they can go as quick as they can. And yeah, it's I mean, a sentence I hear quite frequently is "I'm too emotional," or from men.
That's interesting.
Yeah, like they demonize their emotions, or they ostracize them as something that is potentially dangerous to have. And I can see why they feel that way. Men aren't supposed to have emotions.
They're being told.
Yeah, but then everybody wants them. But as soon as men express them, I don't think that's always received very well in society sometimes.
I think, at least from my experience, men struggle actually expressing in a healthy ways within boundaries.
Yes.
Because they might express it in a way that people don't like it, anger.
Yeah.
You know, like shaming, blaming, disappointment. That maybe they're oftentimes, in my case, missing the words.
Yes.
And also, you know, how do I say to somebody, you disappointed me? How do I say, you made me feel this? How do I find a time and kind of where do I sit down with you to tell you that? You can't just like between like, hey, you know, you made me feel shit. I think it's an art that it's not being taught, and maybe a skill more than an art, because it shouldn't be so rare. It shouldn't be rare. In my opinion, art is rare. But skill shouldn't be so rare as art, and it shouldn't be taught.
Our emotional processing is a basic human skill that we're not taught.
Yeah,
we're not taught very well, because we're taught by people who were taught by, you know, that's why it perpetuates the kind of lacking areas. We only have our experience to work with. But for men, working with men is very I feel it's kind of easier than people might imagine. It is big part of that work is about getting okay with feeling, learning what that feeling means, what's the message, and then becoming confident with expressing it. You know, you can express quite a deep emotion without being out of control, which is what I think many men fear. They fear their own anger. They fear their own strength. You know, sometimes, some maybe not, but but they fear mostly what people will think of them, especially, well, I'm not sure, anyone you know, what people will think of me if I confess that I have a flaw, what I think is a flaw, which is often, you know, but
all the part where, how do I express that I feel fear, that I'm terrified of something?
Absolutely.
That's a huge for men to often just admit to themselves.
Yes.
Being like, where do I go from here then? How can I tell somebody, because I'm playing the, you know, the husband, the father, the, you know, employer. Yeah. You know, how do I communicate that?
There's that vulnerability piece.
Yeah.
Which I know that feeling all too well.
And I do as well.
Yeah. Been there. Yeah. Still there sometimes. You know, it's not like these things go away. No.
You know, we are people beings as well. Like,
we just learn to know. We just bring our awareness to it, and then we know, and then we have a choice we didn't have a choice before.
Yeah. That's seeing that choice, having the awareness, and then having the choice, being like, okay, what do I do now?
Sure. Yeah. And it's been okay with that. Like, it's okay to learn an aspect of yourself. It doesn't mean you have to change it in every situation, but it means that when you decide to go along with a behavior that you've always done, which sometimes limits you, but you know why you're doing it. I know in this situation, I don't have the strength to be different. Or I know with this individual, they're not going to hear what my genuine message is. So, okay, I know I'm doing that thing I always do, but I'm okay with it this time because I'm doing it from a place of knowing rather than a place of unconscious wondering why my life's not what I want it to be, because we're not aware of why we're making the choices we make.
And that's, I guess that's empowering.
Absolutely.
For you being like, well, now I know where I'm coming from. Right now I'm making the choice. I'm consciously making the choice to do it my way or this way.
Yeah.
You know, rather than just being kind of, I guess, pushed to do stuff by my unconscious part, because that's what I always done. That's my strategy that I'm not even aware of. Yeah.
Well, it's like when I traveled here today, I know that there's 2 different ways. I could go through the city or I can go around the toll. Yeah. But if I only know the toll road, that's the only choice I have.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I do happen to know the way to get here through the city, but I chose to pay the price for convenience. So I knew why I was making that decision. So, and it can be the same with when we learn about our emotions or our behaviors. Yeah, sure, you develop new ways to do things or to get where you want to go, which might be better sometimes, but we don't always have to use them. We can be okay if we revert back. Mm-hmm. If we know why we're doing it, it's not so bad. It's like, yeah, I know I wanted to change that part of me or do things a bit differently, but that day just couldn't. It's okay. Yeah. I pay the toll. I do that willingly. Yeah.
And speaking of conscious decisions, when you finished the course, mm-hmm. right, for 4 years, did you know you want to be a full-time therapist? Mm-hmm. Was it like did you know for a while?
Yeah, well, I hadn't been working. I'd been mostly a stay-at-home parent and studying, but I knew I didn't want to work for someone else. And how I knew that is, a lot of my peers on the course were kind of freaking out about job opportunities mm-hmm. and seeing that there was a lack in that. And I was looking as well, and I was thinking, yeah, but actually the job opportunities being offered aren't that attractive. They're not very well paid, and the hours seem bad. And there's everything's in Dublin or nothing. Yeah. It's like, So I just kind of knew that for me, it was, I'm going to work for myself. And I was very sure of that. And the more excited I got about my opening a practice, and like my cohort would they'd say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're doing that. Are you not?
Were you one of the few people who?"
Well, everybody else was kind of focusing at the time. I don't think it's the case now, but at the time they were really kind of focusing on. I suppose they were working full time in their current careers. It's going to be a part-time thing after work. And now I was fortunate. I wasn't working. I had nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. Whereas I know that people who aren't in that situation, it would be quite frightening. So they want to make sure that they have enough before they switch over. And I think sometimes you can get a bit trapped in a no-win situation, because if you're not available the times people want to see you, or if you don't have the capacity, you're never going to be a full-time therapist. You kind of have to jump. Yeah, but people don't have to do that. People find the way that they work that works for them. Mm-hmm. Some people like having two careers at the same time. But I just knew for me, I had a vision in my mind. I was going to have my own practice. I was going to choose my hours. I was going to choose how many. I was going to make my decisions. I was going to record the notes the way I want to. That felt very important to me.
It sounds beautiful. Mm-hmm. Like I think kind of for most people, it's the third and fourth year when you actually have the real clients and mm-hmm. you actually are like able to decide, is this for me? Is it mm-hmm. not for me? I would know people who said, oh, look, I'll finish it, but I know it's not for me. Mm-hmm. Once I'm with clients, it's just not for me, and that's okay. But it was for you. It was. Oh, no,
I knew. Yeah, I was passionate about this. Yeah. I really felt that kind of extra bit of passion didn't really occur until maybe the end of third year, beginning of fourth year. Yeah. When I started to see through my placement work, I started undoing some of those habits and building the confidence to be comfortable with the unknown, but actually finding that more energizing. Yeah. And thinking, I can see myself doing this. Yeah. And I do. Yeah.
What was it like then? So you finished the fourth year, and what happened then?
Well, what happened was, so I was the last year that also did like the diploma level as part of the degree. So we got a diploma in year 3.
Diploma
in psychotherapy, counselling and psychotherapy. So it's level 7.
Yeah.
And that was a qualification that would allow you to start. So I started then. We were still hybrid because of the pandemic. The end of our course became online.
So which year did you finish?
2020.
2020.
Yeah. So the end of our course pretty much became online. But by that point, it wasn't a problem. We were doing our thesis mainly. But yeah, I I just remember saying, right, well, I have my qualification in my hand. What am I doing? I'm not going to sit here and wait for the very final part, because I was qualified. I'd done my full hours. Yeah. Everybody else was sort of just carrying on in their placements, getting accreditation hours. And I was like, I want to get paid for my accreditation hours. Why should I do it for free? Yeah. Not that I don't care, not that I don't want to volunteer, but actually the reality is we need to put a roof over our heads. And I need to take the pressure off my
It's your time as well. Mm-hmm. It's you putting stuff into it.
So I was quite confident if I build it, they will come. It was very much like that. I mean, I did have when it came to figuring out my charges at first, I was like, well, why would they charge? Why I can't charge that? Why would they pay that for me? And all of those little internal things you have to do.
I think there's such an amazing we all most of us, go through this what will I charge? Can I put out this price? Well, people accept that. Will they allow me to charge them for this 4-hour offer?
It's funny because even just now, me kind of apologising for not volunteering. I mean, that's ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah. In a sense. Yeah.
The clients received the real therapy. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I felt effective. Not effective. I felt competent. Yeah. That I wasn't harmful. I didn't feel like I was the best therapist. And, I still don't. I don't claim that. I just am who I am. Yeah. I know I am beneficial, and I know there's some people I'm not so beneficial with. That's fine. I have to let the client figure that out, or sometimes help them figure that out, which can be kind of a weird thing to do. Yeah. But I had belief. I was like, no, I'm gonna look. Yeah, I have to commit to renting this office, but I'm gonna do it. And I figured out the minimum amount of clients I needed to do each month to make my costs.
Break even.
Yeah. I knew I had the support of my partner. He was like, look, it's fine. You won't know until you try. Don't worry about anything for now. I've got you. And I had to be kind of okay with that, about the journey of building the practice. But it's quite the opposite of what I would have done 5 years before my training.
What would you have done? What would be the difference?
I would only have taken a job with a salary, and I'd know exactly what my certainty. Yeah. Starting my own practice would have been completely opposite. And I think it's thanks to my training that liberated my attachment to the need for everything to be okay, because there is no guarantee. Yeah. What you can guarantee is nothing will happen if you stay where you in your little box. There's no life in there. If you want to create your life, you have to step out and be okay. And I reminded myself, and I still do, no matter what happens, I will cope. That's my mantra. Yeah. When I start to think, what if, I just come straight back from what if questions. I'm like, whatever happens, I'll be all right. What if I know all my clients cancelled tomorrow and I never had another client again? What am I going to do? Give up? We'll do something else. It's fine. Yeah. And when you kind of have that belief, or just this kind of knowing that you can't know what's happening or what will happen, but I couldn't know any of the things that ever happened to me. I never did. Yeah. All you can do is just kind of direct yourself the way you want to go. And it's going to turn left and right when you didn't expect, but that's okay. You'll just adjust. So that's really how I've approached my practice. And I think it's actually worked very well for me. Having the belief, people will want to see me. I do deserve to charge what I charge. I am worthy of clients. Yeah. And I don't have to prove myself to anything. That I don't have to do extra, which would have been something, or is something I sometimes spot in other newly qualified. Even myself, I did for a while. I had a Facebook page where I would do these little sort of minute-long videos, sort of self-helpy, but not really. The whole intention behind it was to get people to hear my voice and to sort of see who I was, and hopefully give them some confidence to give me a call, which is actually what it did. Yeah. So the content, but then that was me being a bit extra as well. I need to kind of be some kind of authority in my field, and I don't. And it's been a whole nother journey, launching my practice and figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, which is a completely different field. Which,
Yeah.
in my experience, it's not being taught in the course.
No.
That we do. You finish, at least for me, finish, 4th year, and then like, business.
Yeah.
Clients, cost, expenses, paying taxes.
Yeah, all of those things. But I mean, that's what suits me in the sense that a lot of those things have rules and procedures for.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a rule and procedure for tax. There is a rule and procedure for this, that, and the other. And I could create my own policy about everything. How am I going to deal with a no-show? How am I going to deal with referring? How am I going to deal with disclosure requests? I had to write all that for myself. And that gives me great reassurance because I know my own policy. So, but it can feel very overwhelming. I don't think psychotherapists make natural business owners because of the very nature of the type of people that tend to be therapists. They're caring and giving and selfless, and I don't pretend to be any of those things necessarily.
You're caring, though. You're
absolutely,
very
I care.
Sure.
Oh yeah, but I know my value, which I see a lot of other therapists can struggle with. Feelings of guilt for charging for their services, perhaps eroding their own professional boundaries, not in the sense of the therapy itself, but the way they run their business to accommodate people, which ultimately doesn't really serve them or their business either. It's important to have boundaries, and that can feel kind of tough. It can feel a bit tough to sort of say, no, this is the type of client I see, and I don't see, I don't actively work with addiction. I'm fascinated by it, but I don't feel competent that I can counsel people through addiction. That doesn't mean I don't work with people who are struggling with addiction, but what I tell them is that I don't treat addiction.
They may have their own addiction therapist, but they may be with you for a different part of the journey.
Or they may be thinking about going for addiction treatment, but they're not sure if they're ready or what it is. And we have a very honest and boundaried conversation about what I can provide and what I'm willing to. And, they make that decision. And I have to say, I've had some good work that way. Like, I've worked with people who have overcome or taken the next step then. Yeah, but I don't say, if you're coming to me specifically because you want an addiction treatment, that's a boundary. I can't do that. I don't offer that. Whereas some people might say, well, okay, I'll try. Maybe, I don't know. But I didn't want to be one of those therapists. But sometimes it's saying no is important. And I had an assessment with a client very early days. I think I'd only been open about 6 weeks. Really needed clients, and a person sat in front of me. And after the assessment, it was clear that what they wanted was something therapy would never give.
Okay.
Right. They really needed a lawyer or something. Anyway, so I was upfront and honest about that. And this person was really disappointed, and I had to see that my words were causing disappointment, and I had that guilt. But the ironic story is I had so many referrals from that one individual that I said no to. Wow. I never worked with him. And a new client said, well, the reason I chose you is I know this person. He said that you said no to him, and obviously then you're trustworthy.
That's interesting how you kind of protecting your boundary becomes them being trustworthy.
Yeah. Absolutely. That was my integrity and my honesty. And it could have been very easily swept up with, well, I've only got 3 clients. I need more. Come on board. But being true and aligned with what I knew and being honest and, having to sit with someone that I'm disappointing, that was hard, but it was the right thing. And it was demonstrated to me how right it was in that generating a referral for someone I could work with for the right reasons. And that's happened. Not that I say no to lots of people, I don't. But it's important to, you have to have courage to do that as well. And, I think that's another benefit of the police training and experience, is that to know what can and can't be done sometimes is really important, to be upfront and to have integrity and not promise something you know you can't do. Yeah. So I have those values, I have those boundaries, and I have to say they've actually protected and helped my business to grow. For sure.
And the part of having courage and knowing what you want to do and going for it. Mm-hmm. I can hear it in your story in, quitting the police job, and then moving to Ireland or back to Ireland,
yes,
I should say, and then doing the course, establishing yourself in Neurose. Mm-hmm.
It's all kind of fallen in alignment. So, yeah, quitting the police back then, a lot of people thought I was crazy. I thought I was. I thought, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I have to. Yeah. I have to survive. And that was, even though I wasn't really in tune with my emotional state very well, I was attuned enough with my unconscious that it made me take that decision. Mm-hmm. But I consciously didn't really understand why I was leaving. Yeah.
Isn't that funny in a way how the whole thing is, working out kind of like.
But I had to leave. I don't know where I'd be if I'd stayed. Yeah. Probably nowhere bad. Yeah. But it's not about regret. I just followed the path that's in front of me. And sometimes, on what I've seen, and this is probably a bit spiritual, but sometimes we want something and you're working hard, but all the blocks just feel like they're draining you. And sometimes it's about saying, yeah, this isn't for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's not to say that the things you want come easy. They don't. But the blocks, the things you need to do to get over them don't seem as draining. Like, to qualify, there were so many things: personal therapy, supervision, clinical hours, assessments,
assignments, exams.
Yeah, reading and police vetting and all of these
thesis.
They're all obstacles. They're all a bit of a pain in ways, or they require energy or effort. But hopping over those didn't feel like it was taking something from me. I was like, no, I'm doing this and it's okay. But then some other things in my life that I might have pursued, it's like, oh, now that's going wrong and I have to do this. And it just, part of me was like, no, don't. But the other part was like, well, I think this is what I need or want. And now I've learned what that alignment feeling is. When everything, remember at the beginning, I was sort of saying, when I said those words out of my mouth, it was like, whew, everything kind of clicked inside me. And so when I left the police, I was in alignment, but out of alignment.
Okay. From the logical part, like staying in a good paying job, that was the out of alignment.
That was out of alignment. Yeah. The inner part was, you need to leave. You need to go. And so I was in a personal conflict for like 3 years. Of running away, not understanding why, but knowing I couldn't be where I was. And it was kind of my partner that really helped me with that. Just, he's so blunt, it's wonderful. He's very black and white, so he'll just ask that question like, what is wrong with you? What is up? And just feeling like in that moment he's really wanting me to tell him. And then I could let go of that need to be super fine and invincible and like, I'm struggling. He's like, I know, I can see it. I'm not blind. And then that was, again, so twice he's changed my life with questions, asking the right question. And I think sometimes in therapy we do that. We ask a question no one's really ever been asked before, and it helps. Yeah. So it's one of my favorite counselling questions is, what do you want?
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What is it you want? And people sometimes struggle to answer that. Do you ever notice? Have you ever asked that question?
I don't think I've ever asked that question, not that way. I would ask questions like, what do you think you need?
Oh, yeah.
Or like, where can I support you, or how can I support you? But what is it you want? This is something I need to add into my vocabulary.
Maybe not. Maybe you're asking the same in just a different way. But I've become a fan of the blunt question because it somehow not just because it helped me, but sometimes I think there's too much. I'm even doing it now, trying to find the right words and stepping around everything. And sometimes you just, to be human, you kind of have to say it how it is.
Yeah.
But that question, what do you want? Yeah. What do you want? People don't get asked that very often. On a restaurant, you might get asked that. What do you want? Yeah. But yeah, to be asked, what do you want? And be free to sort of say it. And it's not necessarily that question will reveal exactly what you want. It often reveals what you don't want, or what's not going right, or
what's just the kind of the next step. That's the only one that you can see.
Yeah.
And you don't see the whole path.
Sure.
But that's maybe the only thing that's guiding you somewhere where you want to go on your own.
Or it might develop into the why do you want it? So I want to build a house. Why? It's just what you do, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, and then people start to think, oh, why do I want to do that? It's because my parents did that, or my cousins are doing that, or my best friends are doing that. Is that really what I want? And what they realize is that what they want is not always what they want.
Yeah.
It's what they feel they should do, which is different.
Now, I want to ask you how you work with your clients, but we're going to leave it for the next episode.
Okay.